I'm Matt Downing, and welcome to Diving Deep EDU.
Curious conversations with all types of peeps. Encouraging innovation, we are diving deep. Certainly education is what we like to speak. Fervent with dedication, now it is time to teach. Yeah.
The Diving Deep EDU podcast aims to have thought-provoking conversations that help listeners dive deeper into educational practices with a focus on teacher retention, recruitment, and burnout. Subscribe to the Diving Deep EDU podcast newsletter to get more information about this podcast and these topics. A link is in the show notes. Our guest today is Chuck Keller. Chuck is a leadership and instructional coach with over 20 years experience in education. Having taught at day schools, boarding schools, single-sex and mixed gender schools, Chuck brings a broad collection of experiences to his work with teachers and school leaders. Outside of the classroom, he is a motorcyclist, dog lover, baker, and aspiring author. Chuck, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. I want to start the conversation off by you telling the listeners a little bit more about the work that you're currently doing.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt. I'm really excited to be here today. So, as you said, I'm currently the leadership and instructional coach at Renaissance Academy Charter School in Phoenixville. Renaissance is a K-12 charter school, and we're all on one campus. So, I am the instructional coach for that group of faculty. And that role gives me a chance to really be the person that helps to deliver the induction program to our new teachers, which is something all public schools offer. I also have been working on a new mentorship program that we've been implementing with our second year teachers as sort of a supplement to the work that we did in induction. Of course, any faculty that are a part of the school could work with me on any kind of coaching issues around their pedagogy that they want, and that goes for teacher leaders as well. I previously taught third and fourth grade here at Renaissance, so it's a place I'm pretty committed to. My wife works here, my son goes to school here, and it's just a tremendous group of people. So it's a good place to be.
That's cool. That's cool that you've had different experiences there, and to have a whole family vibe definitely enhances the commitment and feeling part of the community and moving forward. And the work that you're doing not only impacts, yourself and your capacity, but also, your own children and your family and your community. So that's great. Tell me a little bit about the mentorship program. I've been really interested in this idea and the impact of mentorship programs recently, actually talking to colleagues about, okay, how can we tweak this, to have more of an impact on new teachers especially. Tell me a little bit about some of the changes that you're bringing to the mentorship program.
Absolutely. So every public school in the state of Pennsylvania has an induction program. And one of the reasons for that is just logistical. When you get certified, you have a temporary certification, and you have a certain number of years to accrue experience enough that you can apply for what we call an instructional 2 or permanent certification. And one of the boxes you have to check for the State Department of Ed is that you've completed a induction program. So that's really meant to help new teachers, especially novice teachers, not teachers that are just new to our school, but they're just new to the profession, and you're coming in wide-eyed and excited and scared all at the same time. Give them, a group, a cohort to sort of work through that first year with, to get lots of tips and advice about classroom management and grade book and conferences and all those different things that are going to be brand new to you. Some of the other leaders at the school and I were sitting down during one of our leadership retreats and talking about how your first year is really critical. And a lot of times people finish that year with a big sigh of relief. But that doesn't really mean that you're now a seasoned, experienced educator. You've just sort of gotten the scary part out of the way. But there's so much more to have happen. And so our idea was to take some of our most experienced, most talented staff here and pair them up with the folks who completed the induction program the year prior, so that in year 2, they still have that sense of support, that sort of warm blankie to snuggle
Yeah.
up in that tells you everything's going to be okay, but you don't need it the same way that you do that first year. So we've left it pretty open-ended in terms
Nice.
of what it could mean. If you look into mentorship literature and research, you'll see a lot about trying to pair people in similar content areas or similar grades, and preferably even similar just geographic location in the building to make it easier. And we do that as much as we can, but in certain circumstances, you just don't have that perfect match. But what we found is everybody's got something to contribute and to add, even if it's just, oh my gosh, I had a terrible day. And your mentor says, come on over here, let's get a cup of coffee, we'll sit down and we'll talk about it. So it can be lots of different things, from content and lesson planning support to a shoulder to cry on to aspirational things. Sometimes you get those new teachers who are super gung-ho and they want somebody to show them the next best thing right away.
Yeah, that sounds great. A couple follow-up questions. Is it the same mentor that this new teacher had their first year of teaching, or is it a different mentor? And then a question to go along with that, because that's, sort of a quick one. What do you think, like a second year teacher, I'm sure it's unique, right, for many different teachers, but what are some things that you're finding that they need to be successful?
Good questions. So one of the things that I've discovered is that the terms mentor and coach, and there's probably a couple others out there, often get used fairly interchangeably. And depending on which school district you're looking at and whose program you're examining, the terminology can get kind of confusing. So the way we do it here, there's 2 of us, myself and our director of student achievement, who's been with the school since it opened. We run the induction program. So there's lots of different teachers we pull in for different sessions. We bring in like our special ed supervisor to talk about differentiation and 504s and IEPs so that they're getting expertise. But it's just the 2 of us that sort of coordinate and run that program. So we're really the face of it for all those new teachers. The mentor program then is a whole different cadre of teachers that work at the school, and they're classified in 2 ways. We have people here on the evaluation spectrum who are called master teachers. So that's sort of our highest tier that you can reach. Those folks are all asked to be mentors to somebody. And then we have an in-house group of teachers that we call our teaching and learning group that does a lot of professional development internally for the school. And those folks are also part of our mentor cohort.
It's interesting, the last point that you just said. Well, the whole thing was interesting, but your last point sort of got me thinking about another topic about mentorship I've been thinking about. Because as you're explaining this, it's evident that you're using a lot of people in-house, different groups to do different things. And as they're growing, they're supporting. And we've been thinking about the importance of mentorship, not just for the mentor, not just for the mentee, but actually for the mentor, right? To build capacity, to make them feel valued, to have them grow. What have you seen the benefits for the actual mentor as opposed to the mentee being involved in a situation like this where they're, a leader and they're helping and they're sort of showing the tricks of the trade and their craft that they've spent years, forming, whether it be in education years, but then also in practice years? What have been some benefits for the actual mentor?
I think in a way you just described some of it. I think that there's a real sense of giving back, that really good internal feeling when you've done something that someone else values. And so I think that there's sort of 2 levels of it here, and I think they're probably equally important. One of them is, what's my next step as a teacher? And this sort of answers the second part of your original question. now that I've kind of dusted off, my skills and I've been in a classroom for a year, what happens now?
Yeah.
And so there's that technological knowledge of, well, sort of here's the next steps you can take, or here's what it might mean to do project-based learning in your room, or to do stations or centers for these kinds of activities, and let's sort of expand your practice a little bit. I think of it almost like a pitcher, like if you just came into the big leagues, your manager might tell you, like, look, throw the fastball and the changeup. Don't, let's just keep it simple. But, you get a season or two under your belt and you bring in your curve and your cutter and whatever else, and you start to expand it. So I think that that's part of what they're giving. And I think what they're getting is a sense of gratitude from the person they're mentoring. I think it's always good to feel like you have something to contribute. And one of the things that's been really nice is that we realize that even though everyone we've asked to mentor is a seasoned, experienced, exceptional teacher, people still have different skill sets. And you've got your classroom manager, maestro, and you've got somebody else who can build an elaborate lesson in one prep period. And so people will sort of call on each other from time to time, I think, and say, hey, my mentee is got these 3 kids, and I remember you dealt with something like this a few years ago. Can I connect you to? And so it's really also helping, I think, to build a sense of community, which the school is known for, but also trust for those people that are new to the school, that this is a place where they can stumble a little bit and someone's going to catch them and say, don't worry about it. It's okay. We've all done it. Let's figure this out together. And for people who are working in a profession, that's a difficult place to be with a lot of challenges to it, having that trust in your colleagues is a pretty important thing to establish early on.
Yeah, that's really powerful. As you were explaining that, I'm like, man, I want to work in a place like that, where people are collaborating. And it's such a powerful place because you don't have to be a perfect teacher, right? Like none of us are, but taking the assets and the strengths of different teachers for what they are and who they are, and then we can utilize that. And, when we need it, and we can all work together to have a really strong, to have a stronger school and a stronger community. So that's exciting to think about that as you were painting the picture. Now, we first met at a conference and you gave a presentation about some of the strategies you use for new teachers, right? And it was very thoughtful and it was thorough. And I could tell that you spent a lot of time thinking about these things and implementing and tweaking and working on these things. And as you've already explained, that's, part of the thing that you do within your job. Tell me a little bit about the ways that you help new teachers as they come into your school building. So let's break this up into 2 parts. Let's break this up into the part of the beginning of the year, and then we'll move on and we'll talk about what do you do for the teacher that comes maybe in October, November, December, right? Because we're having, it's more rolling teachers in, it seems like, as I'm talking to district leaders, than they've experienced in the past. So I'd be really interested to hear some of the work you're helping teachers do, new teachers at the start, and then as they're rolling into your school year.
Yeah, and we've certainly experienced that after the start of the year hire numerous times. So I can definitely address both of those situations. The way it starts for a new hire is with our onboarding process, and that could potentially be now. So we have somebody coming in tomorrow, actually, that I'm going to meet who's going to teach Spanish for us next year. But we knew that we had somebody leaving, so we'd already posted the role. We found a great candidate. They agreed to the contract. So part of their onboarding day is, getting a laptop and being told what all their logins are and finding out about benefits from HR and that kind of stuff. But I also get a meeting slot with them on that day. And I really love it because it's my chance to come in and be like, look, I'm not, you don't have to take notes. Like, this is just a chance for you and I to hang out. Here's what my role is. And to start to lay that groundwork of, this is a place where you can stay. We've got people that have been here 10 years, 15 years, 20 years since the doors opened, and they're walking the hallways right now. Like, you can dig in here. And as we were talking about earlier, you're going to trip, you're going to stumble. All of us do. It happens to everybody. But here's like 6 different people whose job it is to make sure that when that happens, you get picked up, dusted off, and we get you, situated again. So the only thing you have to be willing to do is to be a little bit vulnerable about where you're at. If you have questions, ask questions. If stuff's confusing, say it's confusing. And I usually finish that session. I give them a little background on the school and its history and some things as well. But the thing I really want to make sure they understand is people want you to be successful. And so the last thing I say to them before they walk out the door is, look, you've either heard of Helen Keller before, or maybe you've purchased Keller's butter at the supermarket. So that's my name. If you don't know who to ask, just start typing Keller into your email and shoot me a message, and I either know the answer or you and I will go find it together. But don't hold on to it.
Yeah.
So that's sort of my first interaction with them. If we get them at the beginning of the year, we have 2 to 3 days of new teacher in service before the rest of the faculty come back.
Okay.
And that's, very intentionally trying to slow things down a little bit and not force them to drink from the fire hose like all day, every day. So it's time in their classroom. It's time with curricular leads to get them textbooks and resources and unit plans. It's time to figure out where the closest bathroom is to their classroom to learn the fire drill route. All those sort of brand new things that you've got to figure out before the rest of the faculty come back and it feels, a little overwhelming and everybody knows each other already and all that kind of stuff. But the way I think about it for those folks also is there's different kinds of concerns. There are pedagogical concerns. Do I really know my content? Do I have the right instructional skills? Can I pull this off as a teacher? There's institutional things like, what's the adult culture here? What are the norms of behavior? Where do I park? What do people do at lunch? Do they eat together? Does everybody sit in their own classroom? What am I comfortable with in that world? And then increasingly, as I'm sure you're well aware, there's a ton of technology stuff to understand, from hardware. Maybe you're a Microsoft person and you just got handed a MacBook, to software programs that give kids a hall pass or send them to the nurse and track how long they've been gone, to your grade book, to, and everything else after that. So it's trying to boil all that down, I think, to the most essential things and spoon feed at the beginning. And, a couple weeks in, we open the window a little bit more and say, okay, you can also do this. And then a month in, open the door a little bit more and feel out where people are, and as I said before, you'll get people who walk in the door and they feel like a seasoned teacher by the end of September and you're just blown away. And, it's in those moments, it's almost like there's a teacher gene and they have it. And you just know, like as a coach, I think to myself, well, I'll keep checking in on them, but I don't need to worry about this person. They're going to be fine. I probably need to learn from them. And then you've got your other people who make it to Halloween and they still look like a deer in headlights, and that's okay. It just means that they're different and they have different needs than that other person. And so you try to meet them where they're at. And
that's great.
I think a lot of it also is this is something I talked about in one of the presentations. I don't know if it's the one that you and I met during, but especially in teaching, I think people come to the profession and behave in their occupational life more or less the same way that they do outside of it. You're the same person when you get to work that you were that morning when you woke up and made your kids breakfast and walked the dog. I don't know that that's true if you're an accountant or a courtroom lawyer or something like that, where maybe there's a persona that you adopt for work that's different. And I bring that up because I think that human beings, we know from other kinds of research what things humans need. We need connection. We need to feel like we belong, like we're part of a community. We learn from each other and from our own experiences. We need to feel a sense of safety. You've got Maslow's pyramid, and sort of foundational levels of safety need to be taken care of. And I think we need to be seen and heard and have an experience that we're an individual. And so for teachers, I think those are the things that matter the most in the beginning. And that's what I think we try to establish for people, is that we see you, we get you, we'll find ways to bring on what you need at a pace and rate that works with where you're at.
Yeah, I love how you're trying to slow it down and pick out the most essential pieces. And it also seems like you emphasize the importance of the relationship and the experience and building into a community for the long term, not just for this year, but you're there to support them. It seems very intentional, very thoughtful, your approach. What do you do for a teacher that comes in November 1st, right? Like someone leaves or, whatever, who knows this situation, why? Someone comes in November 1st. How do you apply that thoughtfulness that you have for the onboarding? Like you explained, you're onboarding someone right now and they're teaching next September. They'll have this time, you're meeting with them. You're probably giving them stuff over the summer. You're probably laying out all of this stuff. Then they have these other 3 days. Then they have the new teacher. Like everyone comes back. What do you do for that teacher that comes in November?
Yeah, it's a crazy scenario. It's a whole different ballgame, because it truly feels like they need everything that day. Like, whatever that first day is, they walk through the door, you want to hand them all of it and say, you're going to need this tomorrow. And in a way, I think teaching, regardless of when you start, is sort of unique in that way. Like if I were an accountant, I don't think I'd show up my first day of the job and they would hand me 50 accounts and say, here you go, best of luck. The bathroom's down the hall on the left, and you would take on full responsibility of your role immediately. But that's what happens. We take a day to onboard somebody, and then the next day they're standing in front of 28 kids who are saying, you're not Mrs. Jones. Are you going to be funny like her? Are you going to be strict? And like, it's bananas what has to happen.
It's funny.
But I think even more so at that point, you have to turn the tap a little wider and let a little more information flow out a little faster, because they need it. But I try to think of it as like, it's pretty easy for me to flash back to my first day in a classroom. And I thought I was totally ready and so confident and so prepared. And the doors to the building opened and kids started coming in, and I flipped out and was scared out of my mind. And these were 8-year-olds. So, how terrifying is an 8-year-old? But it's really trying to do a dance of, I've got to get you a lot of information right away, but I run the risk of completely overwhelming you. And I can't do that because I don't want something to happen that's going to make you not feel okay here. Yeah. So I think part of it for me is trying to be around more. If I've got my group that's in induction that started with me in mid-August, And then I've got this person who came on, at the beginning of November. They're going to see me a little bit more than the other folks because they need me more. And we have other things in place, like every 2 grade levels has what we call a lead teacher. So when I taught 3rd and 4th for part of my time, I was the lead teacher. And so they've got that person they can go to and say,
Okay. Nice.
What's going on with this? What's going on with that? And that person's probably physically proximate to them. They're close in terms of how many doors away. They've got a curricular person who they can reach out to say, I can't figure this lesson plan out. I don't know what to do about this. But more so, the curricular folks will often go out of their way for those mid-year hires to say, like, look, I realized that you were coming. I knew this situation was going to be crazy. Here's your first 3 weeks of lessons. Like, I already wrote them out for you.
Nice.
Everything's got links in it. Your worksheets are already printed. You just have to look at it tonight and execute it tomorrow, and then look at, 2 days from now, and then execute it the next day. Sometimes they'll even help with grading for a little bit, just to sort of ease you into the systems and standards and expectations around, different ways that grades and content areas approach things. So it's not hand holding in the sense of like teaching for them or taking over things completely, but it's trying to say, we'll walk together for a while. And as you start to feel okay about stuff, just say so, and we'll pick up another piece, or I'll back off and spend a little less time and a little less time, and we'll see where we end up.
Yeah, that's cool.
But it's a challenge, period. If somebody out there has a different answer that's working really well, please look up Renaissance Academy and shoot me an email.
As you work with new teachers, right, what do you think they think is their biggest need? So as you're working with them, as you're talking with them, as you're sort of narrowing down to sort of what they desire, what they need, like where's their sticking point? Where's the point that's causing them great anxiety and stress? And again, I realize everyone's unique, but is there a couple, 1 or 2 things that are jumping out as common themes of what new teachers see as their biggest need?
I think so. I think one of the ones that jumps out to me that seems to span grade levels, and it's kind of interesting to be in a K-12 campus because you get to see all different sorts of circumstances throughout a day, is balancing what's going on right in front of you. The cameras are live all the time. Like there's a classroom full of kids in front of you that are doing things and asking you things and whatever, with all of the ancillary stuff, like I need to log into the hall pass software and make a pass while I'm still carrying on this lesson. I need to put in this referral into this system so that it goes to this place, not that place. And I've got to remember which software thing that is. And I've got to get it all done during my prep period, which also includes, going to the bathroom, finding my colleague, calling this parent. And so I think that it's just that, like, I don't just walk in and teach these lessons that I'm excited about.
Yeah.
But there's all these other things that also fall into my bucket, and I don't know how to prioritize and sort of, the juggling metaphor of keeping all the balls in the air.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the one that stands out the most. After that, I think it's a question of, like, what's my style? You can watch the person across the hall who seems really seasoned and in control, and you hear their kids laughing at their jokes. You think, wow, I'm going to be just like that guy, or she's amazing. I can't wait to be that teacher. But it's not necessarily you. And so you can try sort of different personalities on and see where you end up. But I think that it takes a little while to kind of figure out how you're going to do it that's authentic to you, that's not just the technical aspect of here's the lesson.
That's interesting. And that's what sort of like writers say, right? Like as you're writing, you need to find your authentic voice or it's not going to
Exactly.
feel real. And
Yep.
same thing with teaching. Yeah, that's an interesting parallel there. As you've been working with new teachers, as you've been trying different things, as you've been tweaking and trying and, doing all of these things, what's something that you're like, oh, wow, like that was really successful. I didn't expect that. Or, oh, wow, that was a nice change and that had a big impact. Or, oh, wow, the new teachers really felt supported through that change or that support that we provided as a school for those new teachers or for that specific new teachers. Does anything come to mind as you think about that?
There's two things that come to mind. One of them is a change that we made to the induction program. We use a book called Teaching with Love and Logic that the school did a book study on years and years and years ago, before I even was first hired as a classroom teacher. And it really stuck. The whole school read it, from head of the school all the way down to, the teacher aide in a kindergarten classroom. And it's largely around a two-pronged approach that you need to demonstrate empathy to students in order for them to be able to listen to you and sort of care what you have to say in the first place.
That's true.
But you also need them to understand that actions have consequences and that they need to develop the ability to take responsibility for themselves as an individual. And so that kind of is an underlying philosophy, I guess, almost of the school. And we talk a lot about it in the induction program. Everybody that gets hired gets a copy of the book. And we often have chapters that are due to be read prior to one of our induction meetings, and we'll have some, prompt questions to encourage conversation around it. And that's all great. And it's a really cool book. I encourage you to look it up if you haven't. But people tend to want to know, like, okay, that's a neat philosophy and I get it, but what am I going to do tomorrow when I walk back in my room and Jimmy loses his marbles again, and like I need a skill? And so the guy that I work on induction with, we tried to build more of a workshop approach into the program this year, using some of the ideas from Love and Logic, but allowing time in those meetings to do, not just to talk about, not just to listen, but to role play and to act things out and to, give people different scenarios and say, okay, you're the student and you're the bad kid and you're the teacher and you're the this, and okay, go, like, and then sort of talk about it and share different ideas. And I think not only the safety of realizing, like, hey, none of us have any idea how to solve this problem, so at least it's not me. Like, there's a good feeling in a way about realizing you're not the only one. But also, again, it's that, like, everybody's got different strengths, even when you're brand new. And so somebody says something about something they tried in their room, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I'm going to do that tomorrow. I don't know why I didn't think of that. Teachers are amazing thieves, right? Anyone that's ever done classroom observations, that's the greatest part. You walk into somebody else's room and you're like, that's so cool. I'm stealing that and bringing that to my room.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, one of the biggest things.
Teaching's in the news and all of these things, and a lot of times it's in a negative light. Like, teachers are leaving the workforce, which, as I'm talking to researchers, some people might be hyping that up more than what it is in reality, but that's for a different conversation. Or there's this issue, or like, why are teachers going into teaching? But we're seeing, and you're seeing, people are still coming into teaching. What do you think makes teaching still an attractive job, even with some of this negative commentary that we're hearing in the news about the teaching profession? Like, why is teaching still a great profession for new teachers to come into it? And why is it a great profession to have for someone as they progress, through their life?
Yeah, and I'm going to give you a super biased answer. And I say that to people when I have that onboarding meeting with them, I say, I think this is a phenomenal school to work at, but I work here, my wife works here, my kids go to school here. Like there's a bias, but I love teaching. I career changed. I didn't start out as a teacher, and I think I ended up where I'm supposed to be. And so I do think that there's certain people that are just wired for a different sort of experience. They don't grow up thinking about how they're going to make their first million and the mansion and the cars and all these things that they're going to attain. They're just wired differently, whether it's, more empathic or altruistic or whatever the case may be. And I think a lot of those personality types are drawn to teaching. And to me, the big thing is teaching's an opportunity to provide somebody with the things that are going to help them flourish, whatever those things might be. And it's going to be different from one kid to the next, 1 year to the next. I don't know, it's probably a good time of year for a gardening analogy. So my wife and I spent a bunch of time outside this weekend. And if you've got a plant, it's got conditions, it's full sun, part sun, it wants dry soil, well-drained soil, whatever. But if that plant, your student, gets the right amount of sun, gets the right amount of water, they're in the right kind of soil, they're not choked out by other weeds, that plant's going to flourish. And to be able to go to work every day and be a part of nurturing a student, and in my case, trying to nurture teachers to help them have an opportunity to flourish, it's a humbling opportunity, and it's certainly a profound responsibility, but it's also, as anyone that's stuck with the profession knows, it's a pretty remarkable feeling when you're successful. And I think people are going to stay drawn to that. I wish we could fix some things that would make it even more attractive.
Yeah.
But I think people still want that feeling.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Chuck, it is time for the final word. What would you like to say to close out this podcast?
My final word is going to be to the people that are in the profession at the moment. And that is, if you're doing this work, keep fighting. You came into this work for a reason. What you do matters. So take care of yourself, speak up for yourself, and know that what you're doing matters every single day.
Yeah, thanks for that. Before we end, who do you want to give a shout out to?
I can't take this opportunity without mentioning my wife. Bias again acknowledged, but truly she's the most talented and dedicated teacher that I've ever met in all the different settings I've been in. If teaching, God willing, became the NFL, she would have a Jalen Hurts type contract. She's that good. But also to all the teachers and administrators and staff at my school, there's a crazy hardworking bunch of people here, and I feel quite privileged to have the chance to work with them all. It's inspiring to be around people that you see pouring their heart and soul into it every day, and it makes you want to do your work that much harder as well.
Chuck, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast and all your insight. Listeners, thank you for joining us on the Diving Deep EDU podcast. If you liked this episode, subscribe, rate, review, and share it out. Until next time.
Wow, it's time to reflect. That's astounding. You've been checking out the podcast from Matthew Downing. Hope you like diving deep like a scuba diver. And the show provoked hope. That's our true desire.